Now, let us go over to our Bae Eun-ji, who's standing by in our VR studio for the latest on voter turnout. Eun-ji, what's latest?
Well, Jung-min, many expected a high voter turnout in this election, especially after the country went through 6 months of turmoil sparked by a failed martial law attempt, followed by the impeachment of the president. Now that the polls are closed, let's take a look at just how many South Koreans headed to the polls today while we wait for the final results of this election. A total of 77.9% of South Korean voters have cast their ballots, a very high number there. This means almost 8 out of 10 voters have voted in this election. Out of a total of around 45 million eligible voters, over 34 million people have headed to the polling stations today. Now, if we compare this to past presidential elections, the country has continued to see voter turnout of more than 70% since 2012. And this year's voter turnout is actually even higher than the previous election in 2022, when the figure was around 77%. Now, this year's high voter turnout was largely driven by early voting, which took place for 2 days last week. Early voting turnout was at around 34.7%, and this marks the second highest turnout for early voting in a nationwide election system since it was first introduced in 2014. Moving on, overseas voter turnout recorded an all-time high this year. Almost 80% of South Korean nationals living or staying abroad that are able to vote have headed to the polls this year. This is a lot higher than the overseas voter turnout in the 2022 election, when it recorded a little more than 70%. Now let's take a look at the numbers by region. Gwangju recorded the highest turnout, with over 82%, followed by Jeollanam-do province, both liberal strongholds. Now, before I get to those regions, I want to first take a look at the capital regions. This is a very important battleground for this election, as this is the most populated area of the country, with a lot of independent voters that do not lean toward either the Democratic or Conservative parties. In the capital city, first off, Seoul, voter turnout was at around 78.3%. And over in Gyeonggi-do province, where both the Democratic parties Lee Jae-myung and the People Power party's Kim Moon-soo served as governor in the past, this 77.8% of voters headed to the polls. And in Incheon, 76.2% of voters have voted in this year's election. Now, to the middle part of the country, I want to go over to Chungcheong-do provinces, which are also considered swing regions in South Korea's elections. So let's take a look here. Voter turnout in Chungcheongbuk-do province recorded 75.8%, followed by Chungcheongnam-do province with 74.5%. We'll have to keep a close eye on these regions, as candidates who gained more votes in these provinces were not always, but often elected as the president of South Korea. At the southern part of the country, the liberal stronghold Jeollabuk-do province recorded 81.8%. Jeollanam-do province recorded 83%, followed by Gwangju with almost 83%. So you can clearly see that many liberal voters have voted in this election. Now, moving over to regions that are considered conservative strongholds, Gyeongsangbuk-do province and Gyeongsangnam-do province recorded over 77%. And in nearby conservative stronghold cities, Daegu and Ulsan recorded over 77%. Last but not least, Jeju recorded the lowest voter turnout with 73.4%. Now, we are likely to learn who the projector winner is at around midnight, so I will bring you more updates later on. Jung-min.